My name is Deborah, and this is my story. Do you know what it feels like to be oppressed for years? I do. I am an Israelite, and the times I live are not easy. I am also a judge in Israel. Judges mostly handle the affairs of the nation of Israel. My name is Deborah, busy bee, and it showed in the grandness of the things my eyes would see. As far as I know, the only female judge, the only one to be called a prophet, and the only one that performs a judicial function. In the beautiful hilly country of Ephraim, between Ramah and Bethel, there lies a grand palm tree that I love to sit under. Here, I hold out, and the Israelites come to me seeking my wise judgment. It's a peaceful and serene spot. As an individual, I hold a significant position in history, being a part of the distinguished group known as judges. I am known as the wife of Lapidoth, a man whose name means torch in Hebrew. Lapidoth was responsible for providing the large wicks and oil needed to keep the lights of Shiloh's sanctuary burning like a bright torch. And just like the light from those torches, my life had a similar effect on those around me. I spread the light of the Lord everywhere I went, bringing warmth, comfort, and hope to all who crossed my path. I am a prophetess of the one true God. A prophetess was a woman who had the divine gift of prophecy. She was considered a spokesperson for the divine, and was revered for her ability to communicate God's message to the people. The prophetess was regarded as a symbol of hope and was often sought for guidance and spiritual advice. She was expected to speak the truth and convey God's will, even if her message was unpopular or not well received. A faithful prophetess remained steadfast in her convictions and continued to deliver God's message, regardless of the consequences. Interestingly, in many societies during that period, women were not given equal opportunities to hold leadership positions. However, the Israelites broke this convention and were open to engaging women as prophets. This shows that they were more progressive in their outlook compared to other civilizations of their time. The Israelites were subjected to a highly oppressive regime that made their lives incredibly challenging. The regime went to great lengths to render the people completely disarmed, leaving them with virtually no means to defend themselves. The population of 40,000 was left without a single shield or spear. During that time, the land was in a state of utter chaos and disorder. It was rampant with numerous bands of robbers and outlaws who posed a constant threat to the safety of the general public. The condition of the roads was particularly worrisome, as travelers were always at risk of being attacked and robbed. Consequently, people had to resort to taking isolated and less traveled routes, which were often longer and more treacherous, to move from one place to another. This led to a sense of fear and uncertainty among the populace, who had to navigate through an increasingly dangerous landscape just to go about their daily lives. How did things get this bad? Well, I will tell you. It all started during the time of the previous judge. The first judge was Othniel. You see, after our exit from Egypt, my people settled among various groups, namely the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. We coexisted with these communities, adapting to their cultural norms and practices, while maintaining our own unique identity and beliefs. This period of our history was marked by alliances, conflicts, and negotiations. In the past, we made the mistake of intermarrying with neighboring tribes and adopting their religious beliefs. As a result, we turned away from the Lord our God and worshipped the deities of the Baals and Asherahs. This caused the children of Israel to commit evil in the eyes of the Lord, as we had forgotten the true God and served false idols. Throughout history, my people have had to adapt to the cultures of the pagan peoples living alongside them. Unfortunately, one of the ways in which we assimilated was by engaging in intermarriage with the pagan nations in our midst. This caused us to stray. Our ungodly romances led us to worship the pagan deities Baal and Ashtoreth. The mention of Baal and Ashtoreth sends shivers down my spine, as they were known to bring nothing but trouble for my people. Ashtoreth, in particular, was a fertility goddess who was worshipped with a wooden cult object that held great significance to her followers. The impact of their worship on my people was far from positive. Following the death of Joshua, the leadership among the Israelites became fragmented, and the tribes found it difficult to continue their conquest of Canaan. This left several pockets of territory unconquered. As a result, a number of Canaanites' religious practices, including the worship of Asherah, a pagan goddess, began to spread among the Israelites. This caused a significant upheaval within the community. Throughout the course of our nation's history, we have faced numerous challenges and undergone many changes. Initially, we were a people who held steadfast to the teachings of God, firmly opposing the pagan culture of the Canaanites. However, as time passed, our resolve began to falter. We were increasingly intimidated by the Canaanites and their way of life, and eventually, we began to coexist with them more peacefully. This marked a significant shift in our society. As a result, our nation underwent a period of great transformation, with new ideas and practices being introduced and adopted. When you live close to something long enough, it just becomes normal. People are always called to be different by God. It was God's standard for His people to be different from the nations around them, but we had not obeyed. How could we be different if we were serving the same idols as them? We must have disappointed God. God never failed us, but now we must have broken His heart. We had gone to bed with Asherah. The cult of Asherah was known for its indulgence in sensual practices. The rituals were considered to be depraved and repugnant, often leaving those who witnessed them with a sense of disgust and revulsion. Intermarrying with pagan nations and practicing pagan worship were forbidden, but we did not listen. Prior to entering the Promised Land, God cautioned us against the worship of Canaanite gods. Despite God's clear instructions, idol worship was a problem for my people. God despises idolatry completely. It brings God's wrath down on those involved. It defiles and pollutes people and the land. Due to our failure to obey the commands of the Lord, His anger was kindled against us, and as a result, we were subjected to the harsh rule of the king of Mesopotamia. For a period of 8 long years, my people were forced to serve their new ruler, enduring countless difficulties and sufferings that came with captivity. We were under the watchful eyes of our captors. We continued to pray for deliverance from our oppressors, hoping that the Lord would take pity on us and bring an end to our misery. God gave my people just what they wanted. We didn't want to serve God, so He allowed us to be in bondage to a pagan king. We had reaped exactly what we had sowed. Sin has consequences. 8 years. It was many years of bondage, and we were moved to cry out unto the Lord. There is a moment when everyone knows that we cannot free ourselves, and my people came to this moment in 8 years. And thank God, when we cried out to the Lord raised up a deliverer for the children of Israel, who delivered them. Othniel was the one entrusted with the task of delivery. He was a man favored by the Spirit of the Lord, who bestowed upon him the role of a judge and a troubleshooter. He went out to war, and the Lord delivered the king of Mesopotamia into his hand, and his hand prevailed over the king of Mesopotamia. His courage and strength prevailed. This triumph brought peace to the land for the next 40 years. Sadly, after that time, Othniel, the son of Kenaz, passed away. But the cycle continued. Do you think we have learned our lesson? Do you think we stayed with the one that redeemed us? No. Again we did evil in the sights of the Lord. So the Lord strengthened Eglon, king of Moab, against Israel, because we had done evil in the sight of the Lord. The Lord is the judge. The Lord strengthened even our enemies because we did evil. Evil had to be vanquished. And Eglon came in with great strength. So the children of Israel served Eglon, king of Moab, for 18 years. First 8, then 18. We have drifted away from our dependence and obedience towards the Lord God. Our past victory did not last forever. It had to be maintained. We could not just wallow in sin. There are consequences. Sin always brings bondage. Now, when the children of Israel cried out to the Lord raised up a deliverer for them. Ehud. Ehud single-handedly assassinated the oppressive King Eglon in his castle. This was the previous judge before me. What grace the Lord has given us. In the past, my community made the unfortunate decision to turn away from God. As a result, we no longer deserve His grace and mercy. Despite this, when we eventually reached out to Him for help, God did not turn His back on us. Instead, He chose to answer our prayers and deliver us from our troubles. It was a powerful reminder of His boundless love and forgiveness towards those who seek His guidance. After the death of Ehud, the Israelites once again deviated from the righteous path and indulged in detestable actions that were considered abhorrent in the eyes of the Lord. Their conduct was morally reprehensible and went against the principles of virtue and goodness. The observation of an endless movement towards disobedience in people can frequently lead one to feel less and less confident in their ability to stay on the right path. However, it also serves to emphasize the immense mercy and grace of God. A prime example of this can be seen in the history of Israel. Despite our repeated abandonment of God, He never stopped working with us, offering us endless opportunities to return to Him. This relentless dedication and endless forgiveness is a testament to the infinite love and mercy that God has for His creation. So the Lord turned us over to our current oppressor, King Jabin of Hazor, a Canaanite king. It is fascinating to observe that in the present scenario, God opted to employ an entirely different oppressor than the one used in the past. This choice emphasizes the extent of God's power to capture our attention and lead us towards His will. His ability to use any means necessary to accomplish His objectives is a testament to His wisdom and authority. It is a sobering reminder that we must always be vigilant about the various methods that God may use to guide us, even if they may seem unexpected or challenging. Sometimes, even after facing the consequences of their actions, it can take a significant amount of time for someone to truly repent and turn their heart towards God. For instance, my people of Israel were enslaved for 20 years before we finally cried out to the Lord in repentance. Around 160 years after the death of Joshua, King Jabin rose to power and subjected my people to a painful and oppressive rule for 2 decades. The sheer force of Jabin's might and tyranny was enough to instill an all-consuming fear and despair in the hearts of the entire population, rendering the people completely helpless and demoralized. The Canaanites, led by King Jabin, had been God's tool of judgment upon the Israelites for their idolatry. The formidable commander who oversaw the army belonged to none other than Sisera, a name that struck fear into the hearts of his enemies. His residence was in the city of Harosheth Hagoyim, where he strategized and planned his next moves with cunning precision. For a whole 20 years, General Sisera oppressed my people. Sisera commanded a well-trained cavalry army. He also had iron chariots, which were the equivalent of tanks in those days. Sisera had 900 iron chariots and ruthlessly oppressed the Israelites for years. Sisera, the commander of the army, had his residence situated in the town of Harosheth Hagoyim. This town served as the epicenter of Sisera's military operations and was located in a narrow valley that was less than a meter wide. The valley was located at the point where the Kishon River flowed out of the Esdraelon Plain and into the Plain of Acre, ultimately leading to the Mediterranean Sea. Sisera must have thought that this strategic location allowed Sisera to have a significant advantage over us, making it a crucial site for military operations. 900 chariots of iron gave Sisera the mastery over us, as we were limited to infantry. These chariots were two-wheeled, open behind, carrying a driver, a warrior, and a shield-bearer. This servitude was longer than either of the former, and much more grievous. King Jabin, along with his general Sisera, inflicted severe oppression upon my people. This oppression was further intensified by the fact that we were geographically closer to Jabin's kingdom than any of his previous enemies. We were situated deep within his borders, allowing us greater access to his kingdom and providing ample opportunities to launch attacks against him. This made the situation even more dire for us, as we were constantly suffering at the hands of this enemy. King Jabin and Commander Sisera also hated us, as they were the natives of the country, who bore an implacable enmity to us for invading and dispossessing them, and when they had us in their power, would be so much the more cruel and mischievous towards us in revenge of the old quarrel. King Jabin and Commander Sisera also hated us because of his people were sentenced to be our servants. You see, Noah, our ancestor, had cursed Jabin and Sisera's people, the Canaanites, to be our servants. Noah had said, "Cursed be Canaan, the son of Ham. A servant of servants he shall be to his brothers." We would have never been under his oppression. We could have been victors if we had been completely obedient, instead of lazy, afraid, and unbelieving. It was very painful to be ruled over by people whose lands our fathers had taken over, but whom they had foolishly spared. Then my people cried out to the Lord, for Jabin had oppressed us severely for a long time. Although the Israelites under Joshua had defeated the northern coalition and destroyed the city of Hazor, the city had been rebuilt and became the capital of the Canaanites. The army represented the Canaanite power under Sisera's command. The military superiority of the Canaanites was clear because they had 900 chariots of iron, and we were defenseless. During a 20-year period of oppression, the Canaanites paralyzed Israelite commerce and subjected the Israelites to intolerable disruption of normal life. All armed resistance seemed almost impossible for the Israelites, as Sisera encountered no serious threats from the Israelites. The failed answer: Barak. Then we got our breakthrough. The Lord God answered our prayer, and it would be Barak. His father was Abinoam. He was descended from the tribe of Naphtali. This wasn't one of the well-known, powerful, or famous tribes. This was the northernmost tribe in Israel, and much of it bordered the Sea of Galilee. Finally, the year of redemption arrived when Israel was to be delivered from the hands of Jabin and restored to their liberty. The northern tribes, who were closest to the oppressors, felt the effects of Jabin's fury the most, and we wanted God's intercession. For the oppression of the poor and the sighing of the needy, now will God arise. Who would be the person to lead us? Barak. I knew it would be Barak, as I was also a prophetess. This was not my battle. The victory laid for our deliverance. I was not to command an army in person, but I nominated one that was fit. And one day, I sent for Barak. Barak came to me, and I said to him, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, commands you. Call out 10,000 warriors from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun at Mount Tabor, and I will call out Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, along with his chariots and warriors to the Kishon River. There I will give you victory over him." Barak told me, "I will go, but only if you go with me." What? It seemed that the fear of Sisera had indeed spread into the one that would redeem us. "Okay, very well, I will go with you," I replied. However, I warned him with the prophecy, "But you will receive no honor in this venture, for the Lord's victory over Sisera will be at the hands of a woman." Barak was a skilled and experienced military commander who had earned the respect and admiration of his fellow soldiers. Despite his reputation as a fearless leader, he could not help but feel a sense of apprehension and unease when it came to the Canaanites, recognizing them as a formidable and dangerous adversary. Barak's invitation for me to accompany him didn't appear to be a reckless decision. However, the manner in which he insisted upon it implied that he had more confidence in my connection with God than in his own. This gesture highlighted the significance of trust in our relationship with the Lord. Barak found more motivation and encouragement in my physical presence, rather than relying solely on the unseen, but certain assistance of Almighty God. Despite the possibility of unforeseen dangers and challenges, he exhibited his unwavering belief and courage by consenting to embark on this crucial and scary mission. The courageous group of individuals who accompanied him exhibited exceptional valor and an unshakable faith in the Almighty as they set out to challenge the might of Sisera and his formidable army. Our army found themselves ill-equipped to combat their technologically advanced opponents. With only rudimentary weapons at their disposal, they were up against a formidable force of 900 iron chariots, which gave our adversaries a distinct advantage. Adding to their disadvantage, we were led to fight on a plain, which further amplified our enemy's superiority in chariots. Barak and I journeyed to Kadesh, a bustling town nestled in the hills of Zebulun and Naphtali. Upon our arrival, Barak rallied the tribes and summoned 10,000 skilled warriors to join him in his quest. The air was filled with a sense of purpose and determination as we set out towards our destination. Now Heber the Kenite had separated himself from the Kenites, from the son of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, and had pitched his tent as far away as the terebinth tree in Zananim, which is near Kadesh. These were distant descendants of Israel, through Jethro, the priest of Midian, and the father-in-law of Moses, back to Abraham and his second wife Keturah. When someone told Sisera that Barak, the son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor, Sisera gathered his forces from Haroseth Haggayim to the river Kishon. His army consisted of 900 iron chariots and numerous soldiers who were ready to fight. The sound of the chariots echoed through the land as they made their way towards their destination. This was sophisticated and impressive military technology. The armies of Israel, under the direction of Barak and me, were at a great disadvantage. Heber the Kenite gave Sisera notice of Barak's rendezvous, as there was peace between King Jabin and that family. Whether they intended it as a kindness to him or not, it served to accomplish what God had said to me. The word was, "I will draw unto thee Sisera." Sisera's confidence was chiefly in his chariots. Therefore, particular notice is taken of them. 900 chariots of iron, which, with the scythes fastened to their axle trees, when they were driven into an army of footmen, did terrible execution. So ingenious have men been in inventing methods of destroying one another to gratify those lusts from which come wars and fightings. The time for war had arrived. Then I said to Barak, "Get ready. This is the day the Lord will give you victory over Sisera, for the Lord is marching ahead of you." As Barak gazed upon the vast army of Sisera, attempting to encircle the mountain where he and his forces were encamped, a shiver of fear ran down his spine. He felt his resolve weakening and considered retreating to a safer place. That's when I, his trusted companion, stepped forward and urged him to strike against Sisera's army. With a firm voice, I reminded him that this was the day that had been predestined by the divine will for Sisera's defeat. Filled with confidence, Barak stood at the head of his army, ready to face the Canaanite forces. He held fast to his belief that the Lord God of Israel would guide him to victory, and he felt an unshakable sense of purpose. With this assurance, Barak was determined to lead his army to triumph. The enemy's army is beaten back by God himself. Barak obeyed my orders and descended into the valley, even though the enemy's iron chariots would have an advantage over him on the plain. He left his stronghold on the mountain and placed his trust in the Lord, recognizing that salvation cannot be found in hills and mountains, but only in the Lord who is the true Savior of his people. Barak led his 10,000 warriors down the slopes of Mount Tabor into battle. When Barak attacked, the Lord threw Sisera and all his chariots and warriors into a panic. The earth trembled, and the heavens poured. The clouds also poured water. The mountains gushed before the Lord. The torrent of Kishon swept them away. That ancient torrent, the torrent of Kishon. God helped Israel to victory by bringing a flash flood. The muddy conditions made the chariots of iron a hindrance, not a help in the battle. Sisera leaped down from his chariot and escaped on foot. Can you imagine that the oppressive general is now on foot when he previously had an army of chariots? He quit his chariot and took to his feet. The source of his pride and confidence was the chariots he possessed. It is possible to assume that he had looked down upon and challenged the armies of the Almighty, as they were all on foot, without any chariot or horse at their disposal, unlike him. Consequently, due to his overconfidence, he is justifiably humiliated and compelled to abandon his chariot. Despite the fact that his chariot is most likely the best constructed and best pulled of all, he feels safest and most at ease once he has escaped it. During a flash flood, all the chariots present in the area proved to be entirely futile and of no use. The massive amount of water that rushed in with immense force rendered the equipment completely useless, making it incapable of serving any purpose whatsoever. When individuals place their trust in anything or anyone other than the Almighty, they are setting themselves up for disappointment. It's akin to leaning on a thin, fragile reed that is incapable of supporting weight, and as a result, not only breaks under pressure, but also causes countless pains and injuries. This is why it is important to place our faith in the Lord, who is capable of sustaining us through life's ups and downs. The idle may quickly become a burden, and what we were sick for God can make us sick. Behold the pitiable sight of Sisera, how he appears to be in utter distress and misery after being dismounted. It's hard to tell if the man is blushing or trembling more. This situation serves as a reminder not to trust those in power, as they can fall just as easily. If a person who was recently confident in their abilities is now only relying on their ability to run away, it's hard to trust anyone with authority. After the fierce battle, Barak relentlessly pursued the fleeing chariots and the enemy army towards Harosheth Hagoyim. With his army hot on their heels, Barak spared no mercy and decimated all of Sisera's warriors, leaving no one behind. The sound of clashing swords and screams of agony echoed through the valley as the Israelites emerged victorious, thanks to Barak's unwavering determination and bravery. All the charioteers abandoned their chariots in the conflict, as they could not ride them. Not a single one was left alive. Due to Barak's unwavering trust in God, he and his armies were granted a great victory against overwhelming odds. Has not the Lord gone out before you? This is a phrase that speaks of a king or general leading his troops. Therefore, I played a big role in this victory. I was an encourager, building up the faith of Barak and his men. My encouragement was that God, as a king, would go out before his people into battle. Sisera runs. But Sisera fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because there was peace between Jabin the king of Hazor and the house of Heber the Kenite. He went back to those who had informed him of the battle. He thought he would be secure there. He really believed them to be his allies. After being chased and hunted, he found himself in dire need of a safe haven. With no fortress or dwelling of his own nearby, he sought refuge in the tents of the Kenites, a group known for their humble and solitary lifestyle. It's possible that he had previously looked down upon their simple way of living, but now he was grateful to be under the protection of one of these tents. Although there was no formal agreement of alliance or mutual defense between the two, at present, there were no signs of aggression or animosity. Sisera, having sought refuge among a group of people, believed that he would be protected from harm. However, he failed to realize that these people, while not directly impacted by the oppressive rule of Jabin, were in solidarity with the Israelites, who were suffering under his reign. Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Turn aside, my lord, "Turn aside to me. Have no fear." So he turned aside to her and went into the tent, and she covered him with a rug. And he said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink, because I am thirsty." Sisera and Jael's people had established a peaceful relationship. Based on this amicable arrangement, Sisera was convinced that he could rely on Jael's invitation, assuming that it was offered in good faith. It is worth noting that if someone were to pursue a fugitive, they would most likely not search inside a woman's tent. This is because it is considered a breach of etiquette to do so, and it is unlikely that anyone would want to risk their reputation in this way. Furthermore, even if someone did decide to search a woman's tent, it would still be highly unlikely that they would find a fugitive, let alone a weary one. In such a situation, the fugitive could easily hide amongst the woman's belongings or disguise themselves as a woman. Therefore, taking refuge in a woman's tent may be a wise choice for a fugitive on the run. After quenching his thirst, she kindly covered him. Expressing his gratitude, he instructed her to stand guard at the entrance of the tent. He asked her to deny the presence of anyone if any man happened to come by and inquire about his whereabouts. He said to her, "Stand at the door of the tent, and if any man comes and asks you, 'Is there anyone here?' tell him no." The woman treated him with utmost care, tending to his every need as if he were a cherished guest. She seemed particularly concerned with ensuring his comfort, going out of her way to provide him with a cozy spot to rest and replenish his energy should he feel weary. Her attentive demeanor and gracious hospitality must have left an impression on him, making him feel truly valued and appreciated. Was he thirsty? Well, he might have been. Did he want a little water to cool his tongue? The best drink that her tent had to offer was at his service, and it was milk. We can assume that he drank it heartily, and after being refreshed, he was better disposed to sleep. The woman gazed intently at the figure before her. The woman was determined to do everything in her power to ensure his comfort. With gentle swiftness, she reached for a warm and cozy mantle and draped it carefully over his huddled form, tucking it snugly around his shoulders. Only when he wanted her to convey a lie for him and to say he was not there, she refused making any such promise. Jael, the wife of Heber, approached him quietly with a firm grip on a tent peg and a hammer. Without making any noise, she drove the peg forcefully through his temple. The peg went straight through and pierced the ground beneath him. He had been fast asleep and thoroughly exhausted. The impact was so severe that it killed him instantly. In this fascinating story, things take an intriguing turn. According to the divine promise, a woman was destined to defeat Sisera. At first glance, it may seem that I was referring to myself. However, as the story unfolds, we discover that God had a different plan in mind. He chose to use the wife of a Kenite to accomplish Sisera's downfall, leading to an unexpected twist in the tale. Sisera was least safe when he felt the most secure. Human life is a fragile and unpredictable thing. It can be easily sabotaged and threatened by those we charge with our safety, who may ultimately become the very source of our destruction. However, if we seek refuge in God, we can find a steadfast friend who will never deceive us nor betray our trust. Jael's expertise in handling tent pegs was impressive. The task of setting up tents was customarily assigned to a woman, and Jael had honed her skills over the years. She could deftly maneuver the heavy pegs into the ground. According to customs, Jael's actions can be seen as a betrayal of the sacred principle of hospitality. By breaking her promise to Sisera, she acted against the code of conduct that was highly valued in my time. Moreover, she went ahead and killed a man with whom her husband had made peace, which was considered a dishonorable act. Despite her treacherous ways, God was able to use her actions to fulfill his divine purpose. It is clear that Sisera deserved the fate that was ultimately bestowed upon him, as he fought against God's people in support of a leader who had been cruelly oppressing my people. The lesson for us is important. Despite the evil actions of humans, God has the power to turn those actions towards serving his divine purpose. However, this does not absolve the individual of their personal responsibility for committing evil deeds. She found the courage to act partly due to the undeniable signs that the heavens and all the elements conspired against him, as against one devoted to destruction. Additionally, she saw a chance given to her by the divine providence to act and make a difference. Most importantly, she felt a deep inner calling from God that urged her to take action and promised her that she would succeed. The triumph achieved by my people marked a significant milestone in our history, being the first major victory attained since the era of Joshua. During the battle, Sisera, the captain of the host in whom King Jabin had placed complete trust, met his downfall. The king himself, however, was not present in the battle and remained absent from the action. This event caused a significant loss to the army of Jabin. After this decisive battle, full victory was on the way. So on that day, God subdued and humbled Jabin, king of Canaan, before the sons of Israel. And the hand of the sons of Israel pressed down heavier and heavier on Jabin, king of Canaan, until they had destroyed him. The battle against Sisera was important, but it did not end the struggle. It was an important event that Israel had to continue to develop and walk in. The war was not over until Jabin was destroyed. Even after winning a great battle, my people knew that the war could not be considered over until Jabin was defeated. Although Jabin had lost his powerful commander Sisera, he still posed a significant threat to Israel. It was only when Jabin himself was finally defeated and killed that Israel could finally breathe a sigh of relief and feel secure once again. My song. The Lord God had intervened on our behalf, so we praise the Lord God. So on that day, I and Barak also sang a song. Israel's leaders took charge, and the people gladly followed. I sang concerning the overthrow of Israel's enemies and the deliverance to the tribes. Let our gratitude be deep. Let our song be jubilant. When leaders lead. Effective leadership is crucial in every aspect of life. As the ultimate authority, God demands that those who lead his people do so with conviction and integrity, stressing the need of strong and capable leadership. It is through their guidance that individuals within a community can be inspired to achieve their full potential and work together towards a common goal. The relationship between leaders and their followers is crucial for the success of any community. Without the support and commitment of the people, leaders would be powerless to achieve their goals or fulfill their responsibilities. Therefore, it is the responsibility of the leaders to earn the trust and respect of their followers through their actions, decisions, and communication. At the same time, it is the responsibility of the followers to offer their skills, talents, and resources to their leaders, and to hold them accountable for their promises and commitments. My name is Esther. My story started very bleakly. It all took place when my people were in exile. In my account, you will not find the promised land, because I was taken away to another man's land. This is why I changed my name from Hadassah to Esther. We had no home. What would you do if you had no place to call home? How would you feel? My story then gets worse. I had lost both of my parents. However, I found some hope. I was brought under the care of Mordecai, who lived at Susa. Mordecai was my much older cousin, so he had a lot of experience. He was also a man of God that respected the things of God. Like me, Mordecai was also in exile. Mordecai had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Mordecai took care of me like a father. Everything changed with a feast, a lavish feast inside King Xerxes' palace. King Xerxes reigned from India to Ethiopia, and in the 3rd year of his reign, he held a banquet for all his officials and his attendants. The army officers of Persia and Media, the nobles and the officials of the provinces were all there. For a complete 180 days, he displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. When these days were over, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days in the enclosed garden of the king's palace. There were couches of gold and silver on a marble pavement. It was a grand affair. The king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man whatever he wished. The queen also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace of King Xerxes. Her name was Vashti. On a particular day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded his servants to bring Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown, to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was stunning to look at. However, Queen Vashti refused to come when the attendants delivered the king's command. Then the king became furious and burned with anger. After consulting with his wise advisors, the king was informed that the actions of Vashti would set a poor example for the ladies living throughout the realm. Then one of the wise men replied in the presence of the king and the nobles, "Queen Vashti has done wrong, not only against the king, but also against all the nobles and the peoples of all the provinces of King Xerxes. Therefore, if it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. Also, let the king give her royal position to someone else who is better than she." The king acted quickly. Then the king's personal attendants proposed, "Let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Let them be placed under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch, and let beauty treatments be given to them. Then let the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti." This advice appealed to the king, and he followed it. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many young women were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Haggai. I was among those taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai. But how was I to be queen when there were so many beautiful women? I did my best to please the eunuch Haggai, and he took a liking to me and showed me favor. Immediately, he provided me with beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to me 7 female attendants selected from the king's palace and moved me and my attendants into the best place in the harem. I had not revealed my nationality and family background because Mordecai had prohibited me from doing so. To be the queen, I would need the favor of the king. I already had the favor of Haggai and Mordecai. Mordecai always cared about me. Every day, Mordecai walked back and forth near the harem's courtyard to find out how I was doing and what was happening to me. He indeed was my guardian. But there were rules to be followed. Before a young woman's turn came to go to King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. And this is how she would go to the king. Anything she wanted was given to her to take from the harem to the king's palace. She would not return to the king unless he was pleased with her and summoned her by name. When my turn came to go to the king, I asked for nothing other than what Haggai suggested. I was taken to King Xerxes, and the king seemed to be attracted to me more than to any other women, and I won his favor and approval more than any of the other girls. So he set a royal crown on my head and made me queen instead of Vashti. The king gave a great banquet, my banquet. He invited all his nobles. He even proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. All was going so well until I discovered the sinister truth about a vile man called Haman. He hated my people so much and sought to wipe us off the face of the earth. King Xerxes had honored Haman, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and honored Haman, but my cousin Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. The royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. That was Mordecai. They told Haman about all this to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated. Unlike me, they knew that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman sought a way to destroy all of Mordecai's people. Mordecai refused to bow to a mere man. The fear of God overcame any fear of man. The law of Moses did not forbid showing due respect to those in authority, but it did forbid the worship of any but God. Eastern monarchs often demanded such worship. Mordecai's fellow workers sought to gain favor in Haman's eyes by pointing out his refusal. Haman was a very egotistical man, and the sight of Mordecai's blatant disrespect infuriated him beyond reason. Instead of dealing with Mordecai alone, he set in motion a plan to annihilate all the Jews in the kingdom. Haman's first step was to cast lots to determine a suitable date for the mass execution. By a seeming coincidence, the date indicated was nearly a year away, and the lot fell on the 12th month. Then Haman said to King Xerxes. Haman next approached the king with an inflammatory report about Mordecai's people, misrepresenting them as dangerous to the kingdom. He urged that a decree be issued ordering their extinction. So the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman. The king told Haman, "Do with the people as you please." According to the law of the Medes and Persians, once issued, this decree could never be changed or withdrawn. King Xerxes sealed the death writ with his signet ring, sentencing thousands of innocent men, women, and children to be sacrificed at the altar of Haman's pride. Copies of the execution order were sent out with great thoroughness, setting the 13th day of the 12th month aside for the atrocity. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so they would be ready for that day. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. My people were stunned as the news broke throughout the land. There is always sadness where evil reigns. Mordecai put on mourner's garb and lamented through the city until he came to the king's gate, beyond which he could not go, because sackcloth was not allowed in his majesty's presence. He knew that he was the main object of Haman's hatred. In every province to which the edict and order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When my eunuchs and male attendants came and told her about Mordecai, I was in great distress. I summoned Hathach, one of my servants, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city, in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him the whole story. He also gave him a copy of the text of Haman's edict, which had been published in Susa, to show and explain it to me. He instructed me to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Since custom forbade me to leave my confinement in the palace, I sent a servant to take some garments to clothe Mordecai, so the king might not see him in sackcloth. If that happened, he could lose his life. But Mordecai refused to disguise his despair. I responded to Mordecai by reminding him that it was a capital offense to appear before the king uninvited, unless he spared the intruder's life by extending the golden scepter. When my message was passed along to Mordecai, he returned this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for our people will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish, and who knows that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? Mordecai's reply was to the point. If I refused to act now, someone else would arise to deliver the people of God, and perhaps this opportunity to save my people was why I had been exalted to the throne. Each individual has an essential role to play in the ongoing plan of God. Perhaps this is my role. I told them to tell Mordecai, go gather all the Jews that are present in Susa and observe a fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I also will fast in the same way. Then I will go in to see the king without being summoned, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. The line was cast. I just made a decision that may cost me my life, and I am at peace with this. So Mordecai went away and did exactly as I had commanded him. Although my danger be significant, considering the law and the severity which he showed to my predecessor Vashti, I will go to the king and cast myself cheerfully upon God, rather than neglect my duty to God and his people for my safety and success. On the 3rd day, when the fast was completed, I put on her royal robes, summoned courage, and appeared before the king uninvited. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. When he saw me standing in the court, what do you think he did? Well, he was pleased with me and held out to her the gold scepter in his hand. So I approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be given you." This was the moment. The next words I speak would determine the fate of an entire group of people. "If it pleases the king," I replied, "let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him." Then the king said, "Bring Haman quickly so that we may do as Esther says." So the king and Haman came to the banquet that I had prepared. I do this work covertly so that Haman is not even aware of my plans. As Haman and the king drank their wine at the banquet, the king said to me, "What is your petition? It shall be granted to you. And what is your request? Even to half of the kingdom it shall be done." Then I replied, "My petition and my request is this. If I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and to do as I request, may the king and Haman come to the banquet that I will prepare for them. And tomorrow I will do as the king says and express my request." Haman went away that day joyful and in good spirits. He must have felt so special. The queen had invited him to a private event with the king. He just dined with the most important man and woman in the land, and tomorrow He had been invited by the queen together with the king. What could spoil his great mood? Well, I will tell you. It was Mordecai. Naaman saw Mordecai at the king's gate, and Mordecai refused to stand up or even show fear before him. Haman controlled himself and went home. Everything was going better than I could have planned myself. That night, the king could not sleep, so he ordered that the book of records and memorable deeds be brought, and they were read before the king. He found out how my cousin Mordecai had reported that 2 of the king's eunuchs, who were doorkeepers, had planned to attack the king. The king asked, "What honor has been given Mordecai for this?" Then the king's servants who attended him said, "Nothing has been done for him." So the king said, "Who is in the court?" Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace and came in. The king said, "What is to be done for the man whom the king desires to honor?" Haman definitely did not think the king was referring to Mordecai. Haman said, "For the man whom the king desires to honor, let a royal robe be brought, which the king has worn, and the horse on which the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal crown has been placed. And let the robe and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials. Let him dress the man whom the king delights to honor in the royal robe, and lead him on horseback through the open square of the city, and proclaim before him, 'This is what shall be done for the man whom the king desires to honor.'" Following this, the king ordered Haman to move quickly and bestow all of these accolades, not on Haman, but on Mordecai. Then the king said, "Quickly take the royal robe and the horse, as you have said, and do this for Mordecai, who is sitting at the king's gate. Leave out nothing of all that you have said." This must have shocked Haman. He just set my uncle up for great success. Now Mordecai was one of the most influential men in the land. So Haman took the royal robe and the horse and dressed Mordecai, and led him on horseback through the open square of the city, proclaiming before him, "This is what shall be done for the man whom the king desires to honor." Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate. But Haman hurried to his own house, mourning and with his head covered in sorrow. He just made Mordecai a man of more excellent status. He had no authority to shove Mordecai around now. After this, the king's attendants arrived and hurriedly brought Haman to the banquet that I had prepared. This was not the best day for Haman. So the king and Haman came to my banquet, and as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king asked again. He said, "Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be granted." Then I answered, "If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king." King Xerxes asked me, "Who is he? Where is he? The man who has dared to do such a thing?" I said, "An adversary and enemy. This vile Haman." Look at his face. He was terrified. The king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman stayed behind to beg me for his life. This might have been his biggest mistake. The king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall. Haman fell on the couch where I was reclining. The king exclaimed, "Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house?" As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then one of the eunuchs attending the king said, "A pole reaching to a height of 50 cubits stands by Haman's house. He had set it up for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king." can you imagine that? He was working on a plan to get rid of my cousin. I did not have to say anything, however. The king said, "Impale him on it." So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. The king removed his signet ring, which he had taken away from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And I put Mordecai in charge of the house of Haman. This was better than a person could orchestrate. Haman was no longer present, but his heinous plot remained. Then I spoke again to the king and fell down at his feet and wept and implored him to avert the evil plot of Haman and his plan which he had devised against the Jews, because the decree to annihilate the Jews was still in effect. Then the king held out the golden scepter to me, so I arose and stood before the king. Then I said, "If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor before him, and the matter is proper in the king's view, and I am pleasing in his sight, let it be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, which he wrote in order to destroy the Jews who are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the tragedy that will happen to my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred?" The king permitted Mordecai and me to write another decree counteracting the first one. The king's scribes were called, and Mordecai dictated an edict that gave the Jews the right to protect their lives. With great speed, the new law was carried to the utmost parts of the kingdom on swift royal steeds. How much more should the news of man's redemption from the power of evil be disseminated through Satan's realm with thoroughness and speed? Having discarded his sackcloth, Mordecai left the palace in robes of splendor. My people were glad when they heard of the sudden events, while the rest were filled with dread. Not wanting to be numbered among their enemies, many Gentiles became converts at this time. In each province and city, whether the king's command and his decree arrived, the Jews celebrated with gladness and joy a feast and a holiday. Even the princes and rulers aided my people because they feared Mordecai, the kingdom's second most powerful man. Mordecai was a true patriot, and when he was elevated to the highest position under the king, he used his work to help his people. I was far from home, but God placed me in a position of power in a pagan society. Thankfully, I did not compromise my principles. We made significant headway in advancing our faith. My royal position was for that reason. I was called for a time like this. I didn't belong in the pagan world. There was a risk for me to conform to everyone. However, I was prepared to give my life. My name is Esther, and this is my story.